The Dark Rider, Dragon Riders of Osnen, Book 10. Written by Richard Fierce. Narrated by Andrew McDermott. Chapter 1. The night air was crisp and cold, a subtle sign that winter was slowly approaching. I pulled my cloak tighter and stared out over the walls of the Citadel, scanning the darkness. It was quiet, which was good. In the week since we'd returned to the Citadel, Kage had launched several attacks along the Terran border. Master Anesco had been drowning in reports of a black, wingless dragon spewing acid on unsuspecting towns, and there were whispers that the king had deployed his men to investigate. As much as I tried not to let it bother me, I had a sneaking suspicion that Marn and I would be drawn into the chaos somehow. As it was, we'd been added into the rotation for guard duty. The Order had yet to recover from the battle with the false king, and the number of new riders wasn't enough to put a dent in the lack of available bodies. It was a dark thought, but it made sense that Kage had used the dead. They were free labour, and he could essentially raise as many men as he needed. That was a major problem for us, as he could quickly and easily replenish his army. I sighed and was able to see my breath. I hated the cold. I walked along the battlements to the next tower and stood beside a brazier, soaking up the warmth. Another rider, Vedette, stepped out of the tower and nodded at me. "It's a cold one tonight, yeah." "Too cold," I replied. "If you think this is cold, wait until true winter comes." "Does it get colder than Valgard?" "Couldn't say. I've never been there." "I have, twice, and trust me, it's the coldest place you'll ever find yourself in. Even my dragon had trouble there." Vedette shrugged. "Most dragons don't do well in the cold, so that's not surprising." "Regardless, it's not a fun place." "I'll take your word for it. Has Master Anesco returned yet?" "Not yet," I said. "He and Master Katori are due back any day now." "What do you think of all this talk about war?" "Unfortunately, I think it's true. I met Kage and he's insane enough to attack Osnen." Vedette folded his arms and leaned against the wall of the tower. "Well, now that magic is returned, he'll find nothing but a hard time here." I wanted to agree with him, but I knew that if war came to Osnen, our task of defending the land would be easier said than done. I mutely nodded. Master Anesco had sworn me to secrecy regarding Kage's dragonbone flute until he could gather more information. "Let's just pray that Kage loses his nerve. The last thing we need is another war." "I'll give that an amen," Vedette said. "I'm ready for some peace and quiet." Something heavy thudded in the courtyard below. Vedette and I exchanged glances. Then we hurried to the edge of the battlement and looked down. A lone figure was lying prone on the ground. "Did that person fall off the wall?" Vedette asked. "Looks like it." I sprinted for the steps and took them 2 at a time, then rushed over to the figure and knelt. It appeared to be a man. He was lying face down, limbs akimbo. I was hesitant to roll him over, for fear that whatever injuries he'd sustained would be worsened. "Can you hear me?" I gently touched his shoulder. A wheezing sound was the only reply I received, but it was a relief. He was still alive. The man's arms moved slowly, and he started to push himself up. "Stay still," I said. "I'm going to take you to the infirmary." The man turned his head toward me, and I realized the hideous truth. It was a corpse. I scrambled backward, struggling to return to my feet. I drew my blade and struck the corpse on the neck, severing its head from its body. "Sound the alarm!" I shouted, looking to the battlements. Vedette wasn't there. I looked up, searching the night sky for enemies, but a thick haze had formed. It obscured everything. "Magic," I muttered. Another corpse crashed to the ground a few feet away, followed by another. Kagei truly wasn't sane if he thought to attack the Citadel. He might have an army of undead to do his bidding, but this was the heart of the Order. Between magic and dragons, we had the upper hand here. I just needed to ring the bell and warn the others. I made a run for the stairs, but the corpses continued to fall from the sky. They struck the ground and rose quickly, moving much faster than the first one. They lunged and reached for me, their hideous faces twisted into gruesome snarls. I brought my blade up, hacking and slashing through their ranks. "What's happening?" Cyan's groggy voice filled my mind. "Kagei is here." "Here?" The bond flooded with her fury. "I'm coming." An unearthly roar echoed off the buildings. I risked a glance upward and thought I spotted the tail of Kagei's dragon slipping into the haze. Where was Vedette? Why hadn't he sounded the alarm yet? I cleaved my way through the undead and reached the stairs. More corpses landed in the courtyard, and some landed on the battlements above me. Cursing under my breath, I hastily climbed the flight of steps and reached the top to find several undead waiting. They came at me, the smell of their rotting flesh assaulting my nostrils. A commotion in the courtyard signaled Cyan's arrival from the stable, emboldening me. I lunged forward and twisted my blade in an X pattern, removing limbs from the corpses closest to me. The door to the tower was less than 20 feet away. I rammed my shoulder into one of the undead, knocking it over the wall. And then I spotted Vedette. He was lying next to the brazier, an arrow sticking out of his neck. A wave of anger washed over me. I cleaved through one corpse and kicked another off the wall. Once the battlement was cleared, I ran to Vedette. Blood was seeping from his wound, but he was alive. Barely. "I'm going to get help," I said. "Don't give up, Vedette. Do you hear me?" His eyes looked past me, and he took a final shuddering breath. I gently pressed his eyelids closed and hurried to the tower door, but when I tried to push it open, it didn't budge. Vedette and I were the only ones on this position of the Citadel's walls, which meant someone or something had barricaded themselves inside. I whirled around at the sound of something metal clinking behind me. A grappling hook had landed on the battlement. "They are trying to breach the walls," I shouted through the bond. Cyan roared, and flames filled the courtyard below as she immolated a group of corpses that had gathered near her. More were dropping from the sky, but I wasn't worried about Cyan. She could deal with the undead far easier than I could. 2 more grappling hooks came over the wall, clattering loudly as they were pulled taut. The hooks latched onto the stones of the wall. I peered over the edge and saw a contingent of men, real men, climbing up the ropes. "We need help. There are too many, and I can't get the tower door open to ring the bell. Demris has awoken Marin. She's rousing the others. Help is coming." It was better than nothing, but it would take Marin too long to wake everyone. I had to find a way to get inside the tower, but first I needed to deal with the men scaling the walls. I chopped at the first rope attached to one of the hooks, slicing it free. The hook clanged to the ground, and I heard a scream on the other side of the wall. The other 2 were just as easy to cut, but it became clear that Kagei's forces weren't just scaling this side of the Citadel. Shouts echoed from the other guard towers, followed by the clash of steel. I returned to the tower and tried kicking the door open, but it was no use. I thought I could chop through the door, but I quickly gave up on that idea after 2 blows sent numbness coursing through my arms. I held onto the hope that one of the other guards might ring the bell from their side, but I couldn't just stand here and wait to see if they did. "Can you get up here?" I asked Cyan. "I need you to bash this door open." "I'm a bit busy down here." "Well, hurry it up. We don't have all night." "Funny." I looked down at the courtyard and watched Cyan flame another group of corpses. She leapt into the air and flew toward me, I threw myself to the ground as she shot past, slamming her tail into the door. The wood splintered into pieces. I scrambled up and rushed inside. The rope to the bell hung down from the rafters, and I tossed my sword down and grabbed a hold of it. I pulled as hard as I could. Chapter 2. Ding, ding, ding. The bell blared, echoing loudly across the courtyard. Now the whole school would know we were under attack. I released the rope just as I noticed that I wasn't alone. A woman stood in the corner. She had shoulder-length black hair and wore leather armour designed to look like dragon scales. She brushed splinters of wood off her cloak and turned her gaze on me. At first I thought she might be one of the guards, but as she stepped out of the shadows and I got a good look at her, I realized she was one of Kagei's followers. Her hooded eyes displayed her Terran descent, and her demeanour indicated that she was ready for a fight. She drew 2 short blades from scabbards at her waist. I glanced down to where I'd tossed my sword, but before I could make a move to grab it, the woman lunged forward and kicked it out of my reach. It skittered across the room and clanged as it struck the wall. "Where is the dragon stone?" she demanded. "The what?" The woman rushed me, crossing her arms and slamming me backward into the wall. She brought one of the blades up and pressed it against my neck, death in her eyes. "The dragon stone, fool! Where is it?" I had no idea what she was talking about. I'd never heard of a dragon stone before. She must have seen the confusion in my expression, for she growled and stepped back. She spoke a single word, and my entire body froze in place. I tried to fight the spell, tensing my muscles against the unseen force, but I was firmly stuck. The woman glanced around the room and cursed under her breath, then fled through the doorway. I could move my eyes, and I watched her go down the stairs toward the courtyard. "Scion, I'm trapped in the tower. Can you break this spell?" I briefly felt a tingling sensation. "I can't get through it," she replied. "Whatever she did is something I've not seen before. I'll find Marin." I turned my attention to the bond and sent my mind into it, looking for the slit in the wall where I'd found the mysterious magic. It was there, swirling behind the gem-encrusted opening. I called for help, but it didn't react as it had before. I shouted again and waited, but nothing happened. "Marin is coming." Sion's voice echoed within the tunnel of the bond, and I pulled away from the slit and returned the way I'd come. A moment later, Marin ran through the doorway and skidded to a halt. Her hair was dishevelled, and she was covered in blood and dirt. She whispered a string of magical words, and the invisible force melted away, allowing me to move again. "It's chaos out there," Marin said, glancing out of the doorway. "I know. Have you heard of something called a dragonstone?" "I don't think so. Why?" "One of Kagei's minions asked me where it was. I figured if anyone knew what it might be, it would be you." Marin shook her head. "I've never heard of it." I shrugged. A roar reverberated off the walls, and I covered my ears, blanching at the loudness of it. "Kagei is here with his dragon," I said after it faded. "They're hiding in the haze up there." "Just like a coward," Marin spat. I retrieved my sword and sheathed it, then joined Marin in the doorway. Sion was down in the courtyard with Demris, both dragons breathing fire at the horde of undead that had formed. "We need to take the fight to Kagei and stop him here." Marin smiled. "What are you thinking?" "We take our dragons up to give him a proper welcome." "I like it." "How do you feel about fighting Kagei's dragon?" I asked Sion. "The traitor will fall beneath my claws." "Does that mean yes?" Sion chortled. "Yes." She flamed another group of corpses, then launched into the air and landed on the battlements. I climbed up her shoulder and into the saddle, then waved at Maren as Sion jumped off the Citadel wall and took us up into the haze. It was like flying through a cloud, but the layer of haze wasn't very thick. We broke through the top and Sion abruptly banked to the left, narrowly dodging a green dragon that was flying in place. On its back was a Terran man with a bald head. He whistled, warning several other Terran riders that were nearby. I had mistakenly assumed that Kage was up here alone with his dragon. Instead, an entire contingent of riders was hovering above the haze, waiting to join the fray below. I spotted Kage's black wingless dragon. He was flanked by 4 riders, 2 on each side. I was surprised to see that his riders were mounted on both Terran dragons, and ones like Sion. Katori had made it sound like all of the Terran dragons had died, but that clearly wasn't the case. And where had they gotten their winged dragons? Demris and Maren broke through the haze beside us. I looked over at them, starting to rethink my decision to come up here. Before I could say anything, the rider on the green dragon whirled the beast around and came at us. "Hold on," Sion growled. She dove down and barrel-rolled, raking her claws against the underbelly of the green dragon as it passed. It roared in anguish and tried to whip Sion with its tail, but she easily maneuvered out of the way. Sion flapped her wings, taking us above the other dragon. She snatched the rider up in her claws and crushed him, then tossed him aside. His lifeless body disappeared into the haze. "Attack them!" Kage shouted. A dozen dragons rushed to obey him. "Get us out of here!" Sion dove down again, going through the haze and coming out beneath it. In the courtyard, dragons and riders alike were battling the undead. The bells of the other guard towers were ringing now, not that they did much good. Battles were happening everywhere. I searched for the woman who'd froze me in the tower, but I didn't see her. I spotted a few of the curates near the stable, defending the entrance from the undead. Demris and Maren shot past us, a small blue dragon in quick pursuit behind them. The dragon had to be young, much younger than Sion had been when I'd found her in the Necra Desert. I looked back and saw more of Kage's riders exiting the haze. One roared in challenge and darted towards us. Sion sped up, following after Demris. "Many of these dragons are inexperienced," Sion said. "The green one didn't even try to stop me from killing its rider." "I think you're right. The dragon didn't seem affected at all by the rider's death, so they must not be bonded. The question is, where did Kage get these dragons?" "Perhaps he bought them." "Bought them?" I asked skeptically. "Yes, from some nefarious people, like the ones who had me." That made sense. I'd asked Enesco to put together a task force for tracking down groups like that, but we didn't have the manpower to organise a force for that yet. Demris was easily keeping a fair distance ahead of the blue dragon, and Sion and I were gaining on them. Neither the dragon nor its riders seemed to notice our approach. We came up on the right side, and Sion slapped the end of her tail against the young dragon's wing. It yelped in pain and retracted its wing, which sent it flipping end over end. The rider fell out of the saddle with a scream and plummeted to the courtyard. I watched the blue dragon correct itself, then it turned away from the citadel and flew off into the night. "They certainly aren't loyal," I said. "Unbonded dragons usually aren't." Demris must have known we dealt with his pursuer, for he slowed his pace enough for Sion to fly beside him. Maren made a motion with her hand, but I wasn't sure what she was trying to tell me. She shouted to be heard above the wind, but her words were whipped away. Sion sniffed the air. "Terath has returned," she said. I turned around in the saddle, scanning the sky for Enesco's dragon. Terath was an enormous blue dragon, the largest of all the dragons at the Citadel. I caught sight of him coming from the south. Lightning flickered around his mouth, the sight both menacing and majestic. A few of Kage's riders turned around to engage Terath. The massive dragon opened its jaws, and bolts of jagged lightning arced through the sky, striking the riders from their saddles. The dragons didn't change course, however. They attacked Tirith, putting him on the defensive. "Turn around," I said. "We need to help Tirith." Sion did as I asked, and changed direction. As we closed the distance, I spotted more dragons dropping down out of the haze. They flew towards Tirith, and it became apparent that a Nesco was their main target. And then I spotted Katori sitting behind him. Kage didn't care about a Nesco. He wanted Katori dead. Chapter 3. Sion bellowed as she intentionally crashed into another dragon. The creature had dropped down from the haze and didn't see us coming. The force and weight of Sion's body snapped the enemy dragon's left wing, and it crumpled like parchment. The dragon lost control and spiraled down out of the sky. I felt bad for it, but since they were doing Kage's bidding, I knew they wouldn't hesitate to do the same to Sion. A rush of air drew my attention, and I looked back. Demris and Marin were speeding toward Tirith as well, and they swiftly passed us. Demris flexed his wings out, catching the air, and his torso heaved upwards. His back legs swung out, and his claws snatched the smaller dragon from the air. Its rider drew a sword and tried hacking at Demris's legs, but his weapon did nothing to harm the dragon's armoured scales. Demris gained altitude, and then released the dragon with a mighty throw. The poor creature spun through the air uncontrollably, and Demris wasted no time in attacking another enemy. Sion flew closer to Tirith, trying to find the perfect opportunity to strike one of the many dragons snapping and clawing at him. The sky lit up as Katori cast a spell, sending a shower of green glowing orbs into a red dragon. The orbs sparked and hissed as they struck, leaving burn marks on the dragon's scales. Its rider was hit by one of the magical missiles as well, and he screamed in agony. More dragons came down from the haze, including Kage's. The man stood on the dragon's back, clutching the reins in one hand and wielding a glowing sword in the other. We were outnumbered already, and the additional riders suddenly turned an already bleak situation hopeless. I scanned the sky. A few of our riders were up here as well, but they were doing all they could just to keep from being struck down. Looking to the courtyard, I could see the undead had taken over the Citadel. The few riders and dragons that remained were scrambling to flee the area. "This can't be happening." "I'm afraid it is," Sion replied. "At least we will go down fighting." "This isn't the end," I swore. It couldn't be. Marin and I had barely begun our life bond. There were still many injustices to correct, too many people relying on us to protect them. If we failed now, the world would be shadowed in darkness, especially since Kage wanted to rule over it as an emperor. "It's an honourable sentiment, but you must see the truth, don't you? We're scattered and outnumbered. We can die fighting, or we can escape." I couldn't believe Sion was admitting defeat. A loud noise from the west cracked across the sky. The battle stilled, all eyes turning to see what it was. My heart was hammering in my chest and pounding in my ears. Was it the elder dragons? Had Katori and Nesco been successful in getting their aid? And then they became visible. A long line of white dragons was coming this way. It was Hrodin and his riders. "Thank the gods," I breathed. "We're saved." Skarmander, Hrodin's dragon, issued a mighty roar. A cheer went up from the riders who joined us from the courtyard. I assumed someone must have sent Hrodin a plea for help by magical means. How else would he have known to come? The truth, however, was much darker. My eyes widened in surprise as Skarmander struck one of our dragons with his tail, sending the dragon and his rider twisting haphazardly through the air. "What's he doing?" I shouted. "Stop! We're on the same side!" The white dragons joined the battle, but they didn't attack Kage and his forces. They began attacking us. Sion flew closer to Tirith, ready to defend him. Enesco was shouting incoherently, while Katori continued blasting off spells. Tirith fought through the enemy surrounding him and headed east. "Follow Tirith," I shouted. Sion grumbled in reply, but she changed direction. I suddenly felt dizzy and grabbed onto the saddle horn tightly. Magic tickled my mind, and then I could hear Enesco's voice. "Retreat! Retreat and scatter! Leave the Citadel!" The dizziness faded, and I shook my head, trying to clear my mind. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," Sion replied. "I don't like other people being inside my mind without my permission. I don't blame you." I looked for Demrus and spotted him and several other dragons following behind me. To my surprise, neither Kage's forces nor Hrodin's followed us. They stayed at the Citadel, patrolling the sky. Tirith continued into the night for over an hour before descending into a wooded area. We all followed his lead and landed in various spots. I dismounted and rubbed Sion's neck. "Any idea where we are?" "The Shoebrook Forest, if I'm not mistaken." I nodded. I'd never been here, but I'd seen it on maps before. The dizzy feeling returned, along with Enesco's voice. "Wait for the signal, then come." I leaned against Sion until the feeling faded. What signal was he talking about? It was still night, and the canopy overhead blotted out the moon and the stars, making it feel even darker. A few moments passed, and then a red light fizzled into existence ahead. "Wait here," I told Sion, then walked toward the light. The woods were bathed in the flickering light, and I navigated my way through the brush to a clearing. Enesco and Katori were there, along with a handful of others. A quick head count revealed there were less than a dozen of us. I spotted Marin and went to her, wrapping her in an embrace. "I'm glad you're all right," I whispered. "Me too," she replied with a grin. I rolled my eyes and planted a quick kiss on her cheek. "What's going on?" a woman asked. I recognized her face, but I could never remember her name. "Let's wait until everyone is here," Enesco answered. We waited in silence. I had a lot of questions, and I'm sure everyone else did too. The shadows danced around the clearing as the magical light glimmered overhead, and I wondered if Enesco had any warning that Kage had planned an attack on the Citadel. I doubted it, or else he wouldn't have left with Katori. The sound of someone approaching caused everyone to startle. I put my hand on the hilt of my sword, ready to draw it. Curate Henrik stepped into the clearing, clutching a wound on his left arm. "I'm fine," he said gruffly, as one of the riders offered to look him over. "It's nothing to fret about." Henrik joined Enesco, and they shared a whispered conversation. Enesco frowned and nodded. "This is it, then," he said. "More of us escaped, but they fled to other places of safety. Does anyone need medical attention?" No one spoke, but we all looked around at one another. "Very well." He cleared his throat. "It seems we have lost the Citadel." "How could this happen?" someone asked. "It's because the guards were lax in their duties," another replied. "We were already under attack before the first bell even sounded." "They took us by surprise," I said. "I was on the wall when they struck. There was no warning at all. They used magic to conceal their presence." "Says you," the second man grunted. "Stop it," Enesco snapped. "Infighting and casting blame will do us no good. None of us could have imagined this day ever happening. We need to regroup and decide upon a plan of action." "What can we do? Master Hrodin and his riders have allied against us." It was Lara who spoke. She joined the school at the same time as Marin and me. "We will deal with the traitor in due time," Enesco replied. "For now, we will rest. I don't think we've been followed, but I will keep watch regardless. Tuck in for the rest of the night, and in the morning we'll decide on our next steps." The riders dispersed, except for Enesco, Katori, and Henrik. I looked at Maren. "I'm going to speak with Enesco for a moment. I'll save a spot in my bedroll for you," she joked. "You're the best." I kissed her on the lips this time, savouring the brief moment of peace before we broke apart. Maren disappeared into the woods, and I walked over to Enesco and the others. "Eldwin," he greeted. "Are you all right?" "Yes, sir. I wanted to ask you about something." "Can't it wait until morning? You should get some rest." "I couldn't sleep right now if I wanted to," I said. "I trust your bride would welcome your company at least." I stiffened, glancing at Katori. She shook her head slightly. "How did you know?" "Never mind that. What's your question?" "Only a few people knew about our life bonding, so I assumed one of them must have told him. It didn't really matter. We weren't necessarily keeping it a secret. It was just surprising he knew. At the Citadel, I was attacked by someone who asked me where the Dragonstone was. Any idea what that is?" Enesco's expression remained the same, but I saw a flicker of emotion on Katori's face. "The Dragonstone is a myth," Enesco replied. Chapter 4. "What do you mean?" Enesco turned to Henrik and motioned for him to leave. "Get some sleep," he said, "and bandage that wound. Let me know if you need help." Henrik grunted in reply and left, still clutching his arm. Enesco watched him go, a troubled look on his face. He turned his attention back to me. "The Dragonstone isn't a real thing. Then why would Kage be looking for it?" Enesco shrugged. "Kage isn't in his right mind, so I'm sure that has something to do with it." He was right. Still, Katori's face had betrayed her emotions. She knew something, even if Enesco didn't. "What of the Elder Dragons? Were you able to convince them to help us?" Katori shook her head. "No. I played with them, but they refused to get involved. They don't believe human problems are theirs to solve." "If Kage has his way, it won't be just a human problem. It'll be everyone's problem." "We know this, but dragons are stubborn, especially unbonded ones." "You said the stone is a myth, but what is it?" I asked. Enesco pinched the bridge of his nose with his thumb and index finger, clenching his eyes shut. "I'm sorry," I said, thinking I was annoying him with my questions. "It's not you," he replied. "I used a lot of magic to call the retreat, and now I've got a headache." He blinked a few times. "The stories say that the Dragonstone could control dragons, even if they were bonded. The holder of the stone could force a dragon to do anything, even if it was against their will. Thankfully, such a thing doesn't exist, but if it did, well, I think we can all imagine how that would go if it fell into the wrong hands." "That would be a nightmare." "Yes, much like the one we are living in right now, only worse, obviously." "I'm sorry I wasn't able to sound the alarm quicker," I said. Guilt had a funny way of making me feel like a failure. "Don't be sorry, Eldwin. You did everything you could, and that's all I ask." I swallowed hard and nodded. "It just happened so fast. Vedette and I were talking, and then I lost sight of him. When I saw him again, he was—" Tears stung my eyes. Despite my best attempt to hold them back, they forced their way free and slid down my cheeks. "There's not much I can say to alleviate your pain," Enesco said softly. "We must bear it however we can. My mother used to tell me that when it rains, look for rainbows, and when it is dark, look for the stars. I hope those words will help you, as they've often helped me." "Thank you. I will try to remember that. Now go and rest. We have much to do in the morning." I wiped the tears from my face and nodded. My muscles ached and my eyes were burning. I offered a nod to Katori and headed back to where Cyan was. She was curled up under a large tree, the end of her tail swishing back and forth slowly. "Your sadness makes me feel weird," she said. "I'm sorry. It's not bad, just different. Sadness is one of the strongest emotions I've felt from you." "What's the strongest?" I asked. "Love." I smiled and tried not to cry again. "Do you want me to take your saddle off?" "No. If our enemies come for us, it will be better to be prepared. I will sleep with it on." I retrieved my bedroll from her saddle. I wanted to sleep beside Maren, but I felt guilty about leaving Cyan alone. I removed the bands on the ends and started to unroll it, looking in the direction Maren had gone. "Go to her," Cyan said. "But you'll be alone." "It won't kill me. Besides, I sleep alone in the stable all the time." "That's different," I replied. "Just go, human. Don't make me flame you." I laughed and knelt in front of her, pressing my head against her snout. "Thank you." She snorted, her warm breath ruffling my hair. I stood and walked through the woods, peering into the shadows, until I found Maren. Demris was lying behind her. He lifted his head as I approached and stared at me for a moment before resting his head on his front legs. His posture reminded me of a cat. I laid my bedroll down beside Maren and rolled it out. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No, but I will be. Anything you want to talk about?" "No, I'd rather forget the events of this night, to be honest." "So would I. Come on, lay beside me. You can hold me until I fall asleep." I did as she asked, and Maren rested her head on my chest. I stared up at the canopy, thinking about what Inesco had said. I had to have hope. Without it, things were too dark. I needed to find the stars, even if there was only one to be seen. As I drifted off, the last thing I saw was a lone star, shining through a spot in the canopy. I awoke to Maren nudging me gently. I blinked and looked around at our surroundings confusedly before everything came flooding back from the night before. "I was hoping it was all just a nightmare," I groaned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "That would be nice, but unfortunately it really happened." I got up and stretched, stifling a yawn with the back of my hand. My stomach felt empty, but I doubted anyone had brought food with them. "Inesco has asked us for a favour," Maren said. "What is it?" "He said there are a few squads of riders out on patrol near the border, and he wants us to see if we can find them. We'll need every rider available to take back the Citadel." "We'll need more than our scattered patrols, especially with the traitor Rodin. There weren't enough riders before last night. Now we're outnumbered even more." "I know, but every person counts. I told Inesco we would go. Besides, he said one of the squads has something he needs." "Did he say what it was?" "Some sort of box," Maren replied, shrugging. "When do we leave?" "After we find something to eat. I'm starving." I smiled. "A woman after my own heart." "I already have your heart," she quipped. Maren used a spell to trap a rabbit, and I got a small fire going with Demris's help. After we'd eaten our fill, I washed my hands and face in a nearby stream. The water was ice cold and numbed my fingers, but it was refreshing. I filled my canteen and rolled up my bedroll, strapping them both onto Cyan's saddle. "Are you hungry?" "No," she replied. "Inesco has asked us to search for other riders near the border." "I'm ready to fly when you are." "I knew you would say that." I climbed into the saddle and held on tightly as Cyan leapt into the air. She had to be careful of hitting her wings on the nearby trees, but she managed to clear them without much trouble. She flew in circles over the woods, and I watched as the other riders began dispersing in various directions. Demris and Maren finally joined us in the sky, and Cyan and I followed them, as they took the lead and headed west. A few hours later, we were flying along the Terran border. The patrols sent out here were investigating Kagei's attacks, but I was starting to wonder if those attacks had been false reports. There weren't many cities here, and the ones we passed over didn't show any signs of damage. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't long before I realized why. We were roughly a few miles from the last town when Cyan spotted something. "A battle happened here recently," she said. "How do you know?" "There are bodies, and I can still smell the magic in the air. When a dragon dies, its body emits small traces of magic. Based upon what my snout is telling me, it's probably been a day, maybe 2. "Take us down." Cyan roared at Demris and began descending. As we got lower, I could see the bodies she mentioned. There were several dragons, and their riders laid not far from them. There was no doubt in my mind that Kagei was behind this, but something wasn't adding up. None of the towns we'd seen appeared to have been attacked, so what was this patrol doing out here? We landed and waited for Demris to join us. Then I climbed down Cyan's shoulder and walked with Marin over to one of the dead dragons. It must have fallen from the sky, for its body was twisted and bent awkwardly. The rider was still in the saddle, heavily armoured. The helmet still had the faceplate down. We stood there silently for a long while before I spoke. "I think Inesco is lying to us." Chapter 5. "What makes you say that? Look at what this rider is wearing. He's in full plate armour. I'm sure they were expecting trouble from Kagei's forces when they got out here." "Maybe, but everyone knows that fighting in plate armour is almost impossible on Dragonback. And what of the towns? There were no signs of destruction at all." "Do you think the reports of attacks were a trap?" Marin asked. "No, I think Inesco is lying about why this squad was sent out here. You mentioned that he wanted us to find a box." "Yes, what does it matter?" "Remember how I asked you about a dragonstone, and how one of Kagei's people was looking for it?" Marin nodded. "I asked Inesco about it. He said it's not real." "So, you think he lied about the stone? Why would he?" "I think it's real, and that he's hiding it for some reason. Why send us out here, when he could have used magic to call them back if he wanted?" Marin frowned. "You have a point. What does this stone do?" "Inesco said it can control dragons by force. I think Kagei knows it was at the Citadel, and these riders were tasked with taking it somewhere else to hide it." Marin was quiet for a moment. "If what you say is true, then Kagei doesn't have it. These riders were attacked before the Citadel was, which means they didn't find it. The stone must still be here." We began searching the bodies. We searched their clothes, the saddles, and Marin even used a spell to see if anything was being hidden by magic. We searched everything we could, and there was no box to be found, nor a stone of any kind. "What if they already hid the stone and were on their way back to the Citadel when they were attacked?" I asked. "That's the only explanation for why it isn't here," Marin replied. "We should look for it." "I would love to, Eldwin, but unless you have an idea of where it might be, that's an impossible task." I frowned. She was right, as usual. "What should we do then? Look for the other patrols?" "We can if you want to, but if Inesco was lying and sent us out here to find this dragonstone or whatever, then there probably aren't any other patrols. Inesco did mention that we should return immediately if we didn't find anything." "Immediately, huh? That doesn't sound suspicious at all." Marin grinned. "Are you reading my mind? That's exactly what I was just thinking." "Well, we are one flesh now, so—" "Don't make me vomit," Cyan rumbled through the bond. "I didn't realize dragons had such weak stomachs." "There's nothing weak about dragons," she replied indignantly. "You ruined my attempt at humour." "Forgive me," I said, smiling. I suppose I can do that, this time." Of course, her words were in jest. "We'll return to Inesco and let him know there was nothing here." Marin motioned to the bodies. "What of them? We can't give them a proper burial, but we should do something for them." "Yes, we should. We could burn them, but I'm afraid of what might happen to the dragon bones, given recent events. Is there a way you can cast some sort of spell that will keep people away from them, at least until we can honor them properly?" "I think I know just the one." Marin walked around the field, casting a protective ward over each body. After she was done, I climbed up Cyan's shoulder and into the saddle. A wave of magic passed through the bond and washed over me, almost sending me into unconsciousness. I gasped and tried to hold on to the saddle horn so I didn't fall. "Sorry about that," a voice spoke. "I forgot that you humans are so frail." "Who is this?" There was a vague familiarity in the voice, but I didn't understand how it was coming through the bond. "Humans have terrible memories as well. It's me, Terval." I couldn't be sure, but I thought my heart skipped a beat. "Terval? From the assembly?" "Is it all coming back to you now? Good." "I don't understand. How are you talking to me through my bond with Cyan, and why are you talking to me?" "I'm going to ignore the rudeness with which you speak. Listen to me closely, human. You need to come to the Temple of the Bond." "What? I can't. We're sort of dealing with a madman right now." "Kage. Yes, we know of him. That's part of the reason we want to speak with you. Now, make haste, human. We don't have a lot of time." "How do you know about Kage?" Terval's power surged within me, the intense cold of the magic burning my insides. My teeth chattered while my chest was on fire. "Fewer questions and more action. Do you remember the way to the temple?" "I think so, yes." "Very good. Stop scourging that battlefield and come to us." The magic retreated, leaving me weak and shaky. I looked at Marin. She was staring at me with concern. "What happened? You looked like you were starting to convulse." It was Terval from the assembly. She told me I need to come to the temple." "What for?" "She didn't say, but she said the assembly knows about Kage, and it sounded like she knows where we are. She mentioned the battlefield." "Then we should go. It might be important." I shook my head. "We need to let Inesco know we didn't find anything, and tell him where we're going." We probably should do that, but I was really just trying to find a way to avoid going to see the assembly. The magic flared briefly, and I stiffened. "On second thought, we should probably go to the temple first." "She's listening to you, isn't she?" "I can't be sure, but I wouldn't put it past her abilities." "Well, there's no point in waiting here any longer. Lead the way. Demris and I will follow you." I wanted to refuse to go, to say that I wasn't going to allow the assembly to force me to do anything, but I knew I had given them my word and was indebted to them. They had helped us restore Demris after all. That didn't make me hate it any less. "Take me to the temple." "What's the magic word?" Cyan asked. "Is there a magic word needed to reach the temple now?" Cyan snorted. "How would I know? I was making another joke. Instead of telling me to do something, try asking me." "Oh, right. I'm sorry. Terval has left me a little frazzled. Will you please take me to the temple?" "That's better," Cyan hummed. "Off we go." Cyan launched into the air, flapping her powerful wings until we were far above the ground. She turned east and we flew along the border until the flat landscape turned to mountains. We were close to Istral, the capital of Osnen, and the seat of the throne and home to Marin's father, the king. Cyan landed to rest her wings for a bit. Marin and I ate a small meal of leftover rabbit, finishing off what remained from this morning. Marin was quiet, and I suspected it had to do with her father. "Do you think about him?" I asked. "A lot more than I care to admit," she replied. "I miss my mother the most." Her words made me think about my own parents. The more time that passed, the more difficult it became to remember what their faces looked like. I poured some water from my canteen onto my hands and washed the grease from the rabbit meat off. I wanted to tell her that maybe things would change and her father would welcome her back, but that would just be nonsense. I'd met the man, and he wasn't just the worst highborn I'd ever encountered. He was one of the worst people, too. Maren sat on the ground and leaned back against Demris, closing her eyes. "Wake me when it's time to go," she joked. "Stop dawdling," Turville's voice echoed in my mind. "It's time," I said. We mounted up and continued onward. I half expected the king's riders to show up and detain us, but Sion kept a wide berth of the city, and we didn't have any trouble. The further we flew, the more things started to look familiar. The forest where the temple was hidden came into view, and we landed at the outskirts. The tall trees stood like sentinels guarding the way to the assembly. There was nothing to indicate these woods were different from any other forest, but I knew it was deceiving. Birds chirped merrily in the treetops, and small animals skittered around the brush. "Last time it was a nightmare trying to find the temple," I said. "I remember. Maybe this time will be easier, since the assembly told you to come here." I looked at Sion. "Do you want to come along?" "I'll wait here with Demris. He doesn't like the way the forest feels. I don't blame him. We'll be back as soon as we can." Maren slipped her hand into mine, and we entered the woods, weaving our way through the maze of trees. As we travelled deeper into the forest, the air became thinner and it was hard to breathe. I tried not to panic, as I remembered that it happened the last time we were here, but there was something about being suffocated that induced anxiety. Maren slowed her pace, and I stopped to look after her. She was swaying on her feet. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head, and then she collapsed to the ground. "Maren!" Her name came out as a wheeze, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground beside her. Everything started to spin, and then I blacked out. Chapter 6. Within the darkness, a chorus of whispers echoed around me. The words didn't make any sense, and the voices themselves made my skin crawl. I forced my eyes open, and the world was bleary. I blinked several times until my vision cleared, then fought through the fog in my mind. There was a groan beside me. I rolled my head to the side and saw Maren propped up on her elbows. "I feel like I drank too much wine," she said. "It wasn't this bad last time, was it?" "I don't think so," I replied, sitting up. "You'd think if they knew we were coming, they'd have done away with these wards." "Exactly." I got to my feet and offered my hand to Maren, helping her up. She brushed off debris from the back of her pants and looked ahead, nodding toward the temple that hadn't been there when we passed out. "It looks like she's waiting on us," Maren said. Turville was in human form, standing at the top of the temple steps, watching us. I held Maren's hand as we made our way up. I felt a little unsteady, and thankfully there weren't many steps to climb. "You do understand the meaning of the word haste, do you not?" Turville huffed. "We got here as fast as we could," I replied. "Our dragons only stopped to rest once." Yes. Young dragons don't know what stamina is these days. When I was young, I could fly for days without rest." "She's so ancient, she probably doesn't remember when she was young," Sion said. Turville looked at me, and her voice came through the bond. "I heard that, Hatchling. Show some respect for your elders." Sion's confusion flooded the bond, mingling with my own. "How are you doing that?" I asked. "That's not important. Come along. The rest of the assembly is waiting for you." We followed Terval into the temple, and the interior was the same as it had been before, dimly lit, humid, and it smelled like old books. The walls were bare of tapestries or paintings, and our footsteps cracked loudly on the floor. The entire place was constructed of black stone, though I suspected it wasn't made with mortal hands. In fact, I was certain it had been built using magic. The entire temple hummed with it. "How does the assembly know about Kage?" I asked. "We have kept a close eye on the world since the last time you were here. I suppose the issue with Demris was troubling enough to force Nemrith out of her complacency. And I must say, boy, the world is a stranger place than I remember." "Then you know that Kage took the Citadel from the Riders?" Terval waved a hand dismissively. Yes, we know. That school has been a thorn in our side for many years now." "How?" Marin asked. "It's a place of learning." "It's much more than that, but it's not my place to say anything. You'll have to ask Nemrith about the Citadel." Terval stopped and opened a door on the right, ushering us inside. It was the room where I'd first met the assembly. That had been one of the darkest days of my life, back when they tried to revoke my bond with Sion. A long table stretched across the centre of the room, and the other members of the assembly were seated there, conversing lowly. There were 3 empty chairs, and Terval motioned us to sit. I took the chair next to Marin and looked at Nemrith from across the table. "Eldwin," she greeted, "thank you for answering our summons." "Terval said it was important," I replied. Nemrith seemed more civil than before, and I hoped it wasn't a false calm. "It is important. There is darkness creeping across the land, and it must be stopped before it consumes everything in its path." "Are you talking about Kage?" "Yes and no. Kage the man is not much of a threat himself, but the creature that resides in his body is." "What creature?" I asked. "The Enenra." I frowned. "That thing is locked inside the temple under the Terran skull, and Master Katori is the only one with the means of opening it." "How do you know?" "I was there. We closed the door and sealed it." "What of Kage? Did you seal him inside as well?" "No," I said. "He escaped at the last moment." And then the realization hit me. "Yes, he escaped," Nemrith replied, "with the Enenra inside of him." "How is that possible? It's basically a cloud of smoke." Terval and Nemrith exchanged glances, and Nemrith nodded slightly. "The Enenra can merge with a body," Terval said. "The host is usually unwilling, but that doesn't stop the creature. As you've seen, it's a formidable enemy." "And it is one that cannot be defeated," I said. "If it has possessed Kage, how can we stop him?" Nemrith stood and placed her right hand on the table. "There is a way, but it is dangerous." "More dangerous than letting that thing run around in somebody's body?" "Undoubtedly." The surface of the table began to shimmer, and an image formed. It was the Citadel, but there was no colour. Everything was grey, and the outlines of the scenery seemed fuzzy and distorted. "What are we looking at?" Marin asked. "This is the void. It is the realm between life and death, and it is where the Enenra exists in a state of being that can be destroyed." "Let me guess. You want me to go there?" I said. "Yes," Nemrith answered. "If you do this, I will consider your debt repaid." "How does one travel to the void?" "By magic." "Why don't one of you go? Dragons are far more powerful than humans." Nemrith smiled, but there was no joy in her eyes. "Dragons cannot enter the void, else I would have already dealt with the creature myself." "If you go, I'm going with you," Marin whispered. "We only have the power to send one person through," Nemrith said. "If you want to volunteer, you are welcome, but then Eldwin will still be indebted to us." I looked at Marin and squeezed her hand. "I will go. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you." "And you think it's any different for me?" "Of course not. But I vowed that I would lay down my life so that you wouldn't feel pain. Those weren't hollow words. I have magic, Maren said. I'll create my own portal to get there. That's a nice thought, Nemrith interrupted, but it's going to take this entire assembly to generate enough power to allow one person in. I've seen your prowess, and while it's impressive, it is not enough. I'll go, I said softly, and I promise I'll return. Maren's eyes welled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away and nodded. I looked back at Nemrith. You said it's possible to kill the Enenra in the void. Will my sword be enough? No, nothing from the physical world can enter the void. Then how will you send me there? I asked. Your spirit will go, but your body will remain here. I wasn't sure how that would work, but I pushed the thought aside and asked another question. If I can't bring my sword, how do I fight the Enenra? We have a weapon for you, Terval said. It will serve you well. I don't understand. You just said nothing from the physical world can enter the void. That's the interesting part. The weapon was forged in the void, but somehow it exists both there and here at the same time. We don't understand it ourselves. If dragons can't go there, how do you know this weapon exists there? Maren asked. Because the spirit who forged the weapon gave it to us, Nemrith answered. Any other questions? Will I still be able to hear Sion while I'm in there? The members of the assembly glanced at each other uncertainly. We don't know. Maren cleared her throat. What happens to him here if he dies in there? If his spirit is killed in the void, his body will also die. Why me? I asked. Why must I go to the void? She can go, Nemrith said, looking at Maren. But as I said, you will still owe us. I couldn't allow Maren to go in my place. I was beyond scared to go myself, but I meant the words I'd said when we'd life-bonded. Leaning close to Maren, I kissed her, and then rose to my feet. I'm going, I said with finality. Where's the weapon you mentioned? He's too eager, Rissad said. He won't survive. He's only eager because he doesn't understand the danger, Brold replied. I know how dangerous the Enenra is. I came face to face with it. Nemrith smirked. The Enenra isn't what Brold is talking about. That creature is probably hiding somewhere in the void from the other things that lurk there. What other things? I asked. Nemrith's smile faded. Demons. Chapter 7. Demons? I asked incredulously. I thought those were a myth. They are far from a myth, boy, Terval replied. The void is full of them. It would be foolish for any of us to think you won't encounter a few of them while you're in there. Will the weapon you're giving me be effective against them? It will be very effective, Brold said. That's the reason the sword was forged in the first place. To slay demons. Exactly. Terval is right, Nemrith chimed in. The void is the home realm of demons, and you will certainly come against them while you're there. Deal with them as you must, but your task is to eliminate the Enenra. Once the Enenra is destroyed, then you'll bring me back, right? How will you know when I've been successful? Nemrith pursed her lips. That will be challenging. We won't be able to see you while you're in there, and we can only open the portal once, so you must find the Guardian. He will grant you passage back. Wait, you can't bring me back yourselves? No, the amount of magic it will take to bridge the gap between the realms is great, and we won't have the strength to open it twice. Who is the Guardian? Maren asked. The Guardian is the keeper of the void, Terval answered. He ensures that the demons remain there and do not cross into our realm. This was beginning to sound more and more difficult, but I felt that I had little choice in the matter. Instead of complaining, I started trying to commit everything to memory. Where can I find the Guardian? The void is a replica of our world for the most part, so the landscape should look familiar. There is a tower near the border of Pern and Osnen that only exists in the void. That is where you'll find the Guardian." "What about the Enenra?" I asked. "How will I find it?" "The Enenra will be in the same place as it appears in our realm," Nemrith answered. "Kage is still at the Citadel, so that is where you will find the creature." "I have a question," Maren said. "It's not about the void." "What is it? Do you know of something called the Dragonstone?" Every member of the assembly stiffened. "What of it?" Nemrith asked, frowning. "Is it real?" Nemrith glanced at each of her counterparts. They seemed to share an unspoken conversation. Then Nemrith tapped the table's surface with her finger. The image of the void faded, replaced with a glowing blue light. 2 boxes appeared, one of wood, and the other appeared to be metal. Nemrith tapped the table again, and the light died. "The Dragonstone is real," she confirmed, picking up the wooden box. It was square, with a simple latch on one side. Nemrith slid the latch to the side and opened the box. A black stone sat inside. It was dotted with white spots that looked like snowflakes, and it was polished smooth. "If you have it, why did Enesco send us out to look for it under the guise of finding more riders?" I asked. "We took it," Tervel said. "The riders were slaughtered by Kake's men, and we couldn't allow it to fall into his hands. We intervened and brought it here." My eyes widened. "You left the temple?" "We did." "Does it really control dragons by force?" Maren questioned. A shadow passed over Nemrith's face. "It does." "That seems like a wicked thing to create," I said. "It is. I curse the rider who made it every time I think of the stone. Thankfully, the masters of the Citadel have kept it safe until now. Enesco learned that Kage was going to attack the school, so he sent riders to hide it." "I knew it," I muttered. "I knew he was lying about the stone." "He did, but I'm sure it was to protect you. If you knew of its location, that would make you a target. Enesco did well to keep it a secret." I hadn't considered that. I'd assumed his intentions were dishonourable, but clearly I'd been wrong. My eyes were drawn to the metal box on the table. It was about 4 feet in length, and less than a foot wide. "What's that?" I pointed. "That's the sword you will wield in the void." Nemrith closed the wooden box and set it down. Then she lifted the top of the metal box off. Inside was the most breathtaking sword I'd ever seen. The blade was a light green colour, and upon closer inspection I realized it was forged of bronze and had oxidized. The hilt was made of crystal, inlaid with gold, and studded with turquoise. "It's beautiful," Maren whispered. "It's also deadly," Tervel said, removing the sword from the box. "Wield it with care." She held it out to me, and I gingerly grabbed onto the hilt. The crystal was cold to the touch and vibrated with magic, tingling my flesh. I looked at Maren. She returned my gaze, and though we didn't speak, I knew we shared the same thoughts. "I assume you intend to send me to the void soon." "Now would be good," Nemrith replied. "Before Kage leaves the Citadel. Once you're in the void, there's no guarantee we'll be able to communicate anything to you. If he goes on the move, it will be difficult for you to find him." I nodded. I wasn't ready to go, but it was like pulling a bandage off a wound. The quicker, the better. I leaned down and kissed Maren, running my free hand across her cheek. We broke apart, and she smiled sadly. "This isn't the end," I promised lowly. "Don't disappoint me," she whispered back. "Have I before?" "Never." "I don't intend to start." I could feel the eyes of the assembly on us, but I didn't care. "I love you, Maren." "I love you more, Eldwin." "You wish," I said, rolling my eyes. Nemrith cleared her throat. "It's time." The other members of the assembly rose from their chairs, gathering in a circle. They joined hands and began humming. The gemstones in the collars they wore started glowing, and a tiny light flickered to life within their circle. It expanded slowly, growing until it was tall and wide enough to allow me to step through it. Terval released hands with one of the others, opening a way for me to enter. I looked at Marin one last time, then strode toward the open portal. It shifted and flashed like lightning. On the other side, I could see the grey landscape of the void. I stopped in front of the portal and swallowed hard. "I hope this doesn't hurt," I said, then stepped into the swirling mass. My body was thrown backward, and yet I continued onward somehow. I glanced over my shoulder and saw my body collapse to the floor. It was a frightening thing to witness, but I didn't have much time to consider it. The portal whipped away from me, getting lost in the heavens as my spirit was hurled down to the ground. Despite the speed at which I fell, I landed gently and on my feet. I looked around, clutching the hilt of the magical sword. The blade glowed with soft light, but there was no actual colour. It was just brighter than everything else. There was no wind, no heat, no cold. Everything simply existed. I opened my mouth to speak, but decided not to say anything until I knew it was safe. I didn't recognize my surroundings, but I could see the Citadel in the distance. When I tried to walk, instead of moving like normal, I seemed to float above the ground, hovering in the direction I wanted to go. It was awkward at first, but I quickly got the hang of it. As I headed toward the Citadel, I had the feeling that someone was watching me. I subtly looked around, but I didn't see anything. Tall grass, grey like everything else, stood lifelessly still, even as I passed over it. "Where are you?" It was Cyan. Relief flooded me at the knowledge that our bond carried beyond realms. "I'm in the void," I replied, trying to project an image to her. Our bond felt stronger than usual, and I wondered if it was because I wasn't confined to my body anymore. "I sense many dangerous things around you. Why did you let them send you there?" "This is where the Enenra is. I need to kill it so that we can stand a chance against Kage." Cyan's anger and worry swarmed around me, her emotions more powerful than I'd ever felt before. Perhaps I was right. Perhaps being in my body limited what I could experience through the bond, and now that my spirit was free, everything would be more pronounced. "I don't like it," Cyan complained. "I can't protect you in there." "I'll be careful. I'm almost to the Citadel, and that's where the Enenra should be." And then I was there. Everything looked the same aside from the lack of colour. Almost everything was grey, but there were shades of black and white as well. As I stared at the fortress, I spotted two shadows that detached themselves from the wall. Their inky blackness changed form, turning into two wolves. They growled and ran toward me. Chapter 8. I brought the sword up and took a defensive stance, jabbing at the wolves as they got close. The speed with which they moved seemed impossible, and before my blade could strike them, they dodged to the side or crouched low, avoiding my aim. I had to remind myself that they weren't real wolves, but demons in disguise. This was their realm, and I was at a disadvantage. I leapt backward as one of the wolves slipped past my sword and tried to snap its jaws onto my ankle. Its teeth gleamed unnaturally white, and its hackles were raised. The blade suddenly overpowered me, guiding my movements. It was as if I had lost control of my body and someone else had taken over. I twirled in a circle and brought the sword down in a powerful chop. It glowed brighter the nearer it was to the demons, and it cleaved through the head of the one snapping at me, its flare temporarily blinding me. Unlike being in my body, blinking wasn't something I could do. Instead, the glow eventually faded enough for me to see again. The wolf demon I'd struck lay unmoving on the ground. There was no blood, and no bones showed under the damaged flesh. The inky form of the demon was simply dead. Within moments it dematerialized and was gone. I turned my attention to the other wolf. It shifted its glowing red eyes back and forth from me to where its dead ally had been. It howled and then bounded off, fleeing. Not knowing how demons interacted with one another, I decided to keep going. If the wolf was going to get its friends, I didn't want to be here when it returned. The wall that surrounded the citadel was too tall to scale, but as I thought about getting over it, my spirit body moved to obey. I flew through the air and over the wall, landing in the courtyard of the citadel. Nemrith had been correct. Everything seemed identical to the realm of the living, and I easily navigated my way down into the stable. I wanted to catch the Enenra by surprise, and since I knew of the secret passages and hidden rooms within the school, I felt I had the advantage. It also helped that the creature didn't know I was coming for it. "Marin is asking Demris if I'm able to speak with you." "Say yes," I replied. "I already did. He says that you need to hurry. Nemrith thinks Kagay is going to leave the Citadel soon." "I'm in the stable now. Why does Nemrith think he's going to leave?" There was a pause. I levitated up the hidden entrance into the woman's bathing chamber, staring at the shadows until I was certain they didn't conceal any demons. "She says that he's not found the Dragonstone, and he grows irritated. She's afraid he may give up the search and start seeking out the surviving riders. Where in the Citadel is Kagay? I'd rather not run around blindly looking for him." I left the bathing chamber and hovered in the hallway while I waited for an answer. "They don't know. There's a magical barrier keeping them from scrying into the school." "Then how do they know he's getting annoyed?" I asked. "There's a spy feeding information to the riders." So Kagay's men weren't completely loyal. That was a sign of hope. "Who are they reporting to?" "Master Anesco. Nemrith is scrying the camp and listening to his conversations. That's how she knows." "It's a good thing the Assembly is on our side. How would we be able to devise plans if an enemy was aware of everything being said?" "We would probably lose," Sion replied. It seemed I would have to blindly search anyway. I considered the layout of the school. If someone unfamiliar with the place was looking for something valuable, where would they go? I wasn't sure. Instead of wasting time thinking about it, I started traversing the halls, looking in every room I passed. The glow of the sword had lessened since the departure of the wolf demons, so I assumed that meant there were no other demons nearby. I checked the rooms where the students lived, the dining hall and the library. There was no sign of the Enenra. "Has Kagay left the Citadel?" I asked. A moment later, Sion responded. "They don't think so." I hovered in place, trying to figure out where the creature could be. If Kagay knew the Dragonstone was at the Citadel, then he must have known that Master Anesco would be the one who had it, right? "That seems logical," Sion said. "I think I know where he might be." I headed for the hall where Anesco's office was located. It was difficult to imagine how Kagay would think, especially since the man was possessed by a powerful creature. That also made me wonder who was in control, Kagay or the Enenra. Did they battle against one another for dominance, or did Kagay allow the Enenra to do as it pleased? When I reached the door to Master Anesco's office, I paused. Nemrith had said that the Enenra could be destroyed in this realm, but she didn't mention if it was just as dangerous as it was in our realm. Without Sion and Marin, I felt vulnerable. If I died here in the void... "Stop thinking like a mortal," Sion reprimanded me. "Think like a dragon." "How do you mean?" "Dragons don't fear anything," she said proudly. "Have confidence in yourself and in that weapon. When you doubt yourself, you become weak. Be strong instead." It was easy for her to say. She was a dragon, the top of the proverbial food chain. "You're doing it again," Cyan huffed. "Stop being so negative." "I'm sorry. I can't help it." "Yes, you can. Take your thoughts captive and bend them to your will." No more doubts, I told myself. I opened the door and stepped into the room. The first things I noticed were the flames and the smoke. A faint outline of a human stood within the swirling chaos. The Enenra looked completely different here, but I recognized the man's face. It was the innocent man who'd been sacrificed, Kashima. "You! I know you!" His voice was eerie, and the words repeated several times like a litany of madness. "You tried to kill me," I replied. My voice was normal. "I tried, yes. I will not fail twice." "Only one of us is going to leave this room alive." I lifted the magical sword, pointing the tip at the Enenra. "And it won't be you." The creature laughed, a cackling noise that was horrible to listen to. "I'm already dead, mortal." "Prepare to die again." I rushed forward, closing the distance between us, and swung the sword. The Enenra raised its arm to block the strike, grey flames and smoke whipping about. The blade flared brilliantly when it struck the Enenra's arm, shearing through the incorporeal appendage. Instead of the arm falling to the ground, it simply faded from view, ceasing to exist. The Enenra wheeled and drew back fearfully. "What have you done to me? What is that cursed blade?" "This is your demise," I growled, then launched myself forward and jabbed the blade at the creature's chest. The Enenra dodged my strike and sent a wave of fire at me, but I threw myself up into the air at the last moment. The flames passed harmlessly under me. I willed myself back down and landed beside the Enenra, stabbing my sword into the creature's stomach. The blade flared again, the light extending from the blade and into the Enenra's body. Cracks of light appeared on the Enenra's face, and its mouth opened. It screamed. The unearthly cry shook the room briefly, before the Enenra shattered into pieces like glass. The fragments of its being drifted in the air like floating ash, slowly disappearing. "I did it," I told Cyan. "The Enenra is dead." "And you were scared of dying. Mind over body, as I like to say." "I've literally never heard you say that before." "That's because it's something I tell myself." I could feel Cyan's pride coming through the bond. "I need to find the tower," I said, changing the subject. "It's my only way out of here." "Then go." I shook my head and navigated my way out of the school. When I reached the courtyard, I noticed a light in the distance, to the south of the school. It was a single beam shooting straight up into the sky. "That must be it," I told Cyan. "It's in the right direction." "Do you see anything else?" I surveyed the sky, but that was the only thing that caught my attention. "No? Why?" "I can feel something coming. You need to go. Hurry!" The urgency in her tone was unmistakable. I floated over the wall and began heading toward the light. As I left the school behind, a feeling of darkness settled over me. I looked back and saw a multitude of shadowy figures. The demons were coming for me. Chapter 9. I floated over the landscape as quickly as I could. Travelling was much different in this place. The distance sped by, and I was moving faster than Cyan had ever flown. The scenery blurred around me, yet even still, the demons were gaining on me. Their excited cries grew close, but I didn't dare look back. Ahead, I could see the tower. Its white walls stood out against the shadowed field around it. The light stretched into the sky from the spire at the top, but it wasn't obvious what the light's purpose was. "I'm almost there," I told Cyan, "but I don't know if I'll make it before the demons reach me." "Just keep going." I tried to will my spirit to go faster, but it didn't help. As I neared the field, shadows in the tall grass began to move. More demons formed, taking the shape of a multitude of different creatures. They formed a line and rushed toward me. I leapt into the air over them, but they blinked out of view and returned seconds later ahead of me. I swung the magical sword wildly as I landed, desperate to reach the tower. The blade shone brilliantly, cutting through the demons like a hot knife through butter. Their wheels filled the air, and the tower's light seemed to react to the noise. It pulsed repeatedly, and 8 massive tentacles broke free and crashed to the ground, wreathing along the field. They were formed of light and seared everything they touched, including the demons. I looked back and saw that the tentacles hadn't slowed the army of demons. They still chased after me, their eagerness overriding all else. I looked forward just in time to see one of the tentacles coming right at me, and I thought I was going to die. An opening in the tentacle parted for me, sparing me from its searing heat. I continued onward to the tower and reached a gate that surrounded the place. I tried to leap over it, but an invisible barrier kept me from doing so. I tried again, but I only floated up, struck the unseen wall, and floated back down. Behind me, the tentacles thrashed about, destroying demons, but more were arriving. They couldn't defend themselves against the tentacles, but with their increased numbers, some of them were able to slip past the appendages. The air thrummed around me, and I looked to the gate. A door on the tower opened, and a figure stepped out. I waved my arms. "Please, let me in!" The figure walked to the gate. He was taller than me, by at least a foot, and he carried what appeared to be a staff. White robes as bright as the tower behind him draped his frame. It was a man, ancient and wizened, but he radiated power and authority. His eyes looked past me to the field, and his upper lip curled into a slight smile. "Are you the Guardian?" I asked. "I am." "I need your help. I was told you could send me back to my realm." I looked back and spotted a trio of demons stalking toward me. "Open the gate," I begged. The man turned his gaze on me. His stare was penetrating, and it felt as if he could examine my very spirit. He tapped his staff on the ground, and a shaft of light exploded from the top of it, arcing through the air. It struck the demons behind me, destroying them. He stepped back, and the gates opened. "Hurry," he bade, though his tone didn't indicate any urgency. I rushed across the threshold, and the gate closed. "Follow me," the old man said, "and relate the events of how you ended up here." I gave him a condensed version of why the assembly had sent me, and told him the importance of killing the Enenra. The Guardian led me into the tower, and I was surprised to see that it was devoid of everything I would have expected to see. There was no furniture, no lanterns on the walls. There was only light. It flowed from the floor and went up, up, up into the rest of the tower. "It has been a long time since I have seen anything other than demons here. What of the land of the living? Are things well there?" "Yes, for the most part. There are troubles, as there always are, but we find a way to drive back the darkness," I replied. "That is good. Yes, good. This way." He began ascending a set of stone stairs that spiraled up toward the top of the tower. "What does the light do?" "It keeps the demons at bay," the Guardian answered. Even though he looked like he was over 100 years old, his steps were light and quick. I floated along behind him, wondering how a mortal lived in the void, and why. "You don't seem afraid of them." "I'm not," he said matter-of-factly. "There is nothing for me to fear." "Why not?" The Guardian looked at me over his shoulder. "I'm not alive, you know. I'm a spirit." "You are? You move and act like you have a body. I'm also a spirit, but you and I look completely different." "I'm a different kind of spirit," he said, chuckling to himself. "Suffice it to say that I do not fear them, because I exist differently. This tower guards the way to the realm of the living, and I am here to ensure nothing gets through. How did the Enenra get here then? I suppose it has something to do with the way one is created. They originate as mortals, and something happens to them when they die. I've always assumed that the soul mingles with magic somehow, and they are transported here by magic, much like the way the Assembly sent you here. That explanation made sense to me, though who could know for certain if he was correct? We reached the top of the stairs, which turned into a platform. The light continued upward, through the open ceiling of the tower, and into the sky. This high up I could see the shadowy field. The tentacles were still crushing demons. There weren't many of the inky creatures left, and it didn't appear any more of them were joining the fray. "How will you send me back?" I asked. "You must go through the light," he answered. "I don't understand." "You will." The guardian stared at me for a moment, then motioned to my sword. "That is a fine blade. It was forged to kill demons, if I am not mistaken." "Yes, it was. It's very effective, too." "Would you mind giving it to me? I could use it here." The sword supposedly existed in the void as well as in my realm, so I didn't see the problem with giving it to him. I grabbed onto the blade and offered him the hilt. The guardian took it and held it up. With the top of his staff, it disappeared. "Where did it go?" "It's in a safe place. Are you ready to go home?" "I am." "Very well." The guardian tapped his staff twice this time, and the tentacles of light slowly lifted from the field and floated back to the tower, merging into the stream of light flowing into the sky. The light pulsed a few times, then normalized. "Give my regards to Nimrith." The guardian touched the top of his staff to my head, though I didn't feel anything. I began moving backward and left the platform. I entered the stream of light and slowly rose into the air. I was aware that the light was pulling me, directing me. I watched the guardian until he was barely a speck, and then the light whipped me in circles, forcing me through a maelstrom of wind and magic. The feeling of weightlessness faded, and then there was only darkness. As I waited for the shadows to lift, I could hear voices talking lowly. "I will not give them the stone." It was Nemrith's voice. "I'm not saying that you should," Terval replied. "I'm saying that it needs to be used to stop that black dragon. It came back from the island of lost souls. You know what that means." I assumed I was back in my body, but I wasn't able to see or move. "Fine," Nimrith growled, "but I won't use the stone on any other dragon." "Agreed, but we are still outnumbered. Scarmander has betrayed his oath to the riders, and therefore to us. He must face the consequences." Someone sighed, and I assumed it was Nimrith. "I never thought that breaking our neutrality would mean fighting against our own kind." "You could use the stone to force the others not to fight," Terval suggested. "That would save much bloodshed." "It would, but I will not use it. If the traitors fight against us, they will receive their just reward." "Are we all in agreement?" Terval asked. The voices of the assembly members spoke all at once, a resounding approval. My fingers twitched, and then my eyes opened. I was still on the floor, but my head rested in Marin's lap. She looked down at me, her expression one of concern. "Are you all right?" she whispered. "I am now," I replied. "Good, he's awake," Brold said. "What of the Enenra? Did you destroy it?" "I did." A hint of a smile played at Nimrith's lips. I had the suspicion that she didn't expect me to be successful. A wave of pride washed over me, knowing that I had proved her wrong. "Rise, boy," Terval said, "for we go to war." Chapter 10. Marin and I marched through the forest, heading back to where we'd left Sion and Demris. The wards that forced us into sleep while seeking the fortress weren't triggered as we left, and we navigated an overgrown path that wound its way around the trees. Maren grabbed my hand and held it as we walked. "What was it like, being in the void?" she asked. "It was odd," I replied. "There's no colour, and you don't walk. You float everywhere." "Did you see any demons?" I paused. "Yes, too many to count. I never want to go there again." "You won't have to. You've fulfilled your debt to the Assembly, and I can't imagine asking you to go there for me, so I think you don't have to worry about that." "Do you think we can win?" I asked. "Nemrith seems to think so." "Yes, but what do you think?" "Yes, we can win this battle," Maren said adamantly. "We've been up against worse things. Now that the Enenra is gone, the odds have been levelled. Kagei is just a normal person like you and me, and with the Assembly joining us, I imagine there's not much that Kagei can do to fight them." The Assembly members were supposedly like gods among other dragons, but those words were from their mouths. I'd never even seen them in dragon form, so I found it difficult to take solace in their boast. "And since the elder dragons have changed their minds, we'll have their help as well." "How do you know they're going to help?" I asked. "Nemrith. She said that they owe their allegiance to the Assembly. She sent word to them after you entered the void." "How long was I in there?" "A few hours." I stopped walking for a moment, surprised. "Hours? It didn't feel like it was that long." "I'm just glad that you were able to communicate with Sion. I was worried about you, but she kept me updated through Demrys." I squeezed her hand and leaned in for a quick kiss, and we continued walking. We reached our dragons and mounted up, then flew back to the camp hidden in Shrewbrook Forest. Maren and I quickly found Master Nesco, who seemed relieved to see us. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "You had me worried you'd been attacked by Kagei's men." "We weren't," I replied. "It's a long story." Maren and I told him what happened and where we'd been. When I mentioned that I knew the Dragonstone was real and that the Assembly had it, Enesco's demeanour changed. "We need the stone," he said angrily. "Why didn't you bring it with you?" "I don't think Nemrith would have handed it over," I said. "Without the stone, we won't stand a chance against Kagei's forces. Rodin's riders outnumber us 2-1, and that doesn't include Kagei's men. I want you to take me to them, and I'll get the stone myself." "I don't think that will be necessary," Maren said. "Why not?" Alarmed shouts rose from the other riders in the camp, and Enesco rushed to a spot where the canopy overhead was thinner than the rest. He looked to the sky and gasped. I thought it was funny at first, as I'd never heard him make the sound before, and then I followed his gaze, and my eyes widened. An enormous black dragon was approaching, flanked by 2 dragons on either side, blue and green on the left, red and white on the right. Their bodies were so large they blotted out the sun as they circled over the forest. "To arms!" It was Rizid's voice, the red dragon. The scales on her underbelly were covered in scars, a testament to the numerous battles she had fought. "They've come to help us," I said, "and they have the Dragonstone with them, but they won't use it on any dragon except Kagei's." "What about the others?" Enesco asked, his tone one of awe. "We'll have to fight them. Did you find the other riders?" "Yes." Enesco tore his eyes away from the Assembly and looked at me. "Yes, we found them. There are a few groups scattered in different places, awaiting my signal." "Your signal for what?" I asked. "For battle. Kagei attacked the capital." Maren's face paled, the colour seeming to disappear in the blink of an eye. "When?" "I received the report not long ago. I was about to issue the order to attack before you 2 arrived." "What are we waiting on?" Maren snapped. "Let's move." She ran toward Demrys, leaving me behind with Enesco. I watched her run, fearing that it might be the last time we saw each other. I remembered what Sion had said about taking my thoughts captive and bending them to my will. "This is not the end," I told myself. I am proud of you, Sion's voice rumbled through the bond. It's a small step. Each one counts. You should probably give the signal, I said. Our Marin will make sure there is no one left to fight. Enesco smiled. I don't doubt that. I want to apologize to you, Eldwin. For what? For lying to you. I knew the Dragonstone was real, but I didn't want to get you involved in case things didn't go well. You are one of the best riders I've known, and I hate that I abused your trust. I hope you understand why I did it. I didn't understand before, but I do now. Will you forgive me? Enesco offered me his hand. I clasped it in mine and nodded. I do. Thank you. Now, go to your dragon and get ready, and you might want to brace yourself. I hurried to where Sion was waiting and climbed into the saddle. A moment later, Enesco's voice magically boomed within my head. We fly to Istral. Sion growled at the mental intrusion and launched into the air. Across the forest, dragons and their riders took to the sky. We were few, but with the assembly flying with us, I thought we looked rather imposing. Nemrith and the others were huge, bigger even than Skarmandur. We turned southeast and sped over the countryside. There were no signs of Kagei or his minions, but that soon changed as Istral came into view. Large plumes of smoke rose into the air, and fires were scattered across the city. Dragons flew over the entire city, destroying everything in their path. A small pocket of resistance had formed around the palace. It was the king's riders. They were surrounded and outnumbered, but they fought on bravely. The other riders Enesco had summoned came from the west, along with a host of wingless dragons that I assumed were the elder dragons. They all joined our ranks as we drew closer to the city. Demris and Marin broke off and flew toward the palace. I cursed and was about to tell Sion to follow them when a horn blared. I scanned the area looking for the source and spotted Rodin and Skarmandur. They had been attacking the palace and broke away, coming toward us. Several of his riders answered his call, flanking Skarmandur. Terval roared in challenge and shot ahead, the wind from her wings whipping at my clothes and stinging my eyes. Attack! Enesco shouted, both physically and through our minds. Our forces split apart and joined the raging battle. Sion tilted to the left and angled toward the palace, quickly gaining speed with a few flaps of her powerful wings. Demris engaged a smaller blue dragon, ripping its rider from the saddle with his claws. On your left, I said, spotting a white dragon coming at us. I see him. Sion barrel-rolled, bringing her wings in close to her belly. The white dragon zipped past, missing her as she tried to swipe at her body. Unfurling her wings, Sion caught the wind and whipped around, giving chase to the white dragon. Its rider was dressed similar to K.L, and I prayed it wasn't him as Sion overtook the dragon. She raked her rear claws along its back and breathed fire, her flames engulfing the rider and blackening the dragon's scales. It roared in pain and dove down, trying to get out of Sion's reach. She let him flee and turned her attention to another dragon. This one was one of Kagei's. It was a blue dragon, roughly the same size as Sion, but it was much slower than the one she just maimed. It tried to adjust its angle to meet her head-on, but Sion was too quick. She swooped up at the last moment, clawing the dragon's face. It shrieked and jerked away, causing its rider to fall off its back. The dragon didn't have a saddle, and the man free fell until he struck another dragon, then spun end over end until he crashed into the rubble of a destroyed building. He probably died instantly, but I still winced. Now that we were lower, I could hear people screaming. Buildings burned with intense heat, and bodies littered the streets. It brought back dark memories from the battle with the false king, and I had to steel myself against them. Too much death, I said. We will have time to mourn after. She was right, I knew, but that didn't change the way I felt about it. Green flames ignited a guard tower near the palace, and the stones sizzled and popped. What was that? I asked. Sion wheeled around, and I had my answer. It was Kagei's black dragon, and standing atop its back was Kagei himself. Chapter 11. Kagei held the reins of his dragon in one hand and a glowing blade in the other. He shouted orders to his dragon, who turned its head and continued pouring green flames from its mouth. I'd never seen a dragon breathe fire that colour before. "It's not normal fire," Sion said. "It's powered by dark magic. I can feel its unholy pulse from here. We need to stop him. Do you think you can take his dragon?" Sion hesitated. "I don't know." "There's no need," Tervil's voice interjected. "Nemrith will deal with him." "Get out of our bond," Sion growled. Temper, Tervil teased. "I've woven into your bond, hatchling. Where do you think that magic comes from?" "What magic?" I asked. "The icy cold magic that resides in the tunnel of your bond." I knew exactly what she was talking about. The gem-encrusted slit I'd found, so it wasn't some mysterious power after all. It had been Tervil. "That was you the whole time?" "Yes." "Even the first time, when I fought the basilisk?" "Did you like that mirror spell? It's one of my personal favourites." "But how? Why?" "So many questions," Tervil said. "Perhaps one day you will get your answers, but it will not be today." Her presence in the bond faded, and Sion rumbled in anger. I patted her neck comfortingly. "Don't let her bother you. I'm sure there's a reason she's connected to us, and she did save our lives with that spell." Sion's anger subsided, but she continued to grumble to herself, and took her frustration out on a passing enemy by lashing the rider from the saddle with her tail. The dragon didn't turn to fight, but instead flew away from the city in retreat. A deafening roar filled the air, and Nemrith's body cast a shadow over us as she flew towards Skarmundur, joining Tervil. The dragons clashed, snapping and clawing at each other. Although Skarmundur was on the losing end, he didn't back down. Hrodin jabbed at Tervil and Nemrith with a lance, but it bounced harmlessly off their scales. Sion turned away from them and gained altitude, then levelled out. I gazed over the city, looking for where we were needed most, but it was difficult for me to tell friend from foe when the dragons weren't white, but Sion was able to discern the difference by their scent. "There," she said, "Anesco and Katori are in trouble." The pair were riding on Tirith, and they were surrounded by a group of Kagei's men. Katori fired off a spell, striking a rider with a dazzling bolt of lightning. Sion flew toward them, dropping down amongst the enemy dragons. She breathed fire and lashed with her tail, scattering their ranks. Anesco thanked us with a wave of his hand before his dragon sped away from the area. I looked at the palace and saw that the king's riders, with the help of Demris and Marin, had secured the area. No enemies flew nearby, and soldiers on the ground were scrambling to put out fires. Across the sky, battles were still raging in full force. With the king safe, I turned my attention to Kagei. His black dragon undulated through the air, heading for Nemrith and Tervil. They had Skarmundur on the ground, and Tervil's jaws were clenched around the white dragon's neck. Hrodin lay a few feet away, unmoving. "Watch out!" I shouted. Kagei's dragon opened its mouth, spewing out a torrent of green flames. The fire enveloped both dragons, and they roared in pain. Released from Tervil's grasp, Skarmundur struggled to his feet and snatched Hrodin up in his claws, then took to the air, fleeing. "Coward!" Kagei bellowed. Tervil and Nemrith remained where they were, trapped within the wreathing green fire. I wasn't sure what it was doing to them, but they seemed to be unable to escape. "We need to help them," I said. "I'll draw him away," Sion replied. She dove, swatting at Kagei with her tail as we passed over him. He dropped his sword and snapped his gaze up at us, and if looks could kill, Sion and I would have been dead. He jerked the reins with his hand, directing his dragon after us. Sion ascended higher and higher, leading Kagei away from the assembly members. The black dragon was swift, faster than Demris, and he was almost on top of us. Sion swerved to the right, dipping and rising in dizzying patterns. Her maneuvers helped us a little, but Kagei was close enough that he was able to use the magic of his bone flute against us. A haunting tune reached my ears, and I covered them with my palms, trying to blot out the sun. Sion's flapping grew sluggish, and we slowly began to descend. "That music is making me tired," she complained. "Fight it! I can't. You must. If he catches up to us, he'll kill us." Sion shook her head lazily, but if she was trying to clear her mind, it didn't work. We were flying low now, just above the ruined city. I closed my eyes and entered the bond, travelling through the tunnel to the slit where Turbal's magic resided. "I need your help," I begged. "I've got my own problems, boy. Just give me a little bit of magic." Turval grunted in reply, and I felt a surge of power stream through the bond. I uncovered my ears and placed my hands on Sion's neck, funneling the magic into her. The icy magic pushed back against the magic of the flute, and Sion tensed. Kagei's dragon hovered above us, his claws reaching. "Hold on," Sion said. She retracted her right wing, letting the left one catch the wind. We whipped to the side and arced up, spinning in a complete circle before Sion levelled out, above and behind Kagei and his dragon. I looked down at Kagei and had a crazy idea. It had to have been born of insanity, for there was no way I would have ever considered it before. I climbed out of the saddle and drew my sword. "What are you doing?" Sion asked. "Bringing an end to this." I ran along Sion's neck, pushing myself forward against the wind. I cleared her horns and slid down her snout, then grabbed the hilt of my blade with both hands and leapt into the air. The wind whipped against me as I fell, but my aim was true. I crashed into Kagei and drove my sword down against his dragon's back as hard as I could. The blade broke on impact, shattering into a dozen pieces. I managed to hold onto the hilt, and I slammed the end of it into Kagei's face. There was a crunch as it connected with his nose, and blood flowed freely. He barely seemed affected. Kagei tried to wrestle the hilt from my grasp, and we rolled onto the back of his dragon, perilously close to falling off. He pinned me, a maniacal grin on his face. "You think you can win?" he screamed, his tone filled with madness. "I'm unstoppable." "The Enenra thought that too," I shouted back, "and then I killed it." Confusion shadowed Kagei's face. I pushed him off of me and brought my leg up, planting my foot on his chest. He still looked confused as I kicked him off the dragon. To his credit, he didn't scream as he fell. Then again, he was probably so consumed with insanity he didn't even understand that he'd just lost. His dragon roared and dived, tossing me into the air. I managed to see Kagei crash to the ground before his dragon could reach him, and then I closed my eyes and waited for death to take me too. My fall broke suddenly and unexpectedly as Sion caught me in her claws. "Not so fast," Sion said. "You said yourself this wasn't the end." I burst into a fit of crying laughter, the tears streaking across my face from the wind. I saw Nemrith and Turval were free of the green fire, and they chased Kagei's dragon as he tried to escape. I assumed Nemrith used the dragonstone because the black dragon suddenly fell from the sky. The other assembly members joined Nemrith and Turval, and they all descended violently on the prone dragon. I averted my eyes and looked for Marin. She and Demris were still at the palace. With Scarmander and Hroden gone, the other white dragons had begun retreating to the west. Kagei's forces were in disarray, and our riders quickly defeated those who remained. The dragons they had stolen were let go where they pleased, and many of them flew off into the distance. Sion took us to the palace, and I waved awkwardly at Marin. We shared a smile, and Sion set me down, landing gently among the rubble of a building. Istrel had been mostly destroyed, and we had lost more riders in the battle. As things began to settle, the cost of what Kage had done started to settle in. "Look at all of this destruction," I said, staring at the scene around me. "Battle is never easy," Sion replied, "and it is never cheap. But we have hope, and that is enough." "Is it?" "It must be." Chapter 12. I stood at the window of my bedchamber, staring out at the courtyard as the sun crested the horizon. It had only been a few days since the Battle of Istrel, but the repairs from the damage that had been done to the Citadel were almost complete. Marin and I had helped, as had all the riders who remained. We had accomplished much in a short time, and it made me proud to be a rider. Master Inesco had called a meeting of the curates and adepts, and I had woken early with anticipation. There weren't many riders left, and the new students had either fled in terror or been killed in the attack. I assumed this meant that Inesco was going to be handing out promotions. I turned around and saw Marin staring at me. "Why are you up already?" she asked tiredly. "I couldn't sleep," I said, shrugging. "And I didn't see the point in lying in bed for no reason." "You didn't want to watch me sleep?" Marin asked, smirking. "I did for a while, but it was boring." Marin sat up and tossed a pillow at me, but I caught it and threw it back at her. It struck her in the head, and she glared at me. "It's too early," she complained. "Aren't you excited? I think Inesco is going to promote us to curates today." "Why would he do that?" "For one, because we're deserving of the rank, but also because there aren't enough curates now. If he wants to bring in new students, that's the only option." Marin slipped off the bed and stretched, covering her yawn with her right hand. "I suppose that he might do that," she said. "Is that what you want?" "I think so. It would be nice to help aspiring riders, and since I've always worked with a disadvantage, I think I can offer a lot of advice to those who struggle." "You're a good man, Eldwin." Marin walked across the room to where I was and wrapped her arms around me in a hug. I pulled her close and held her, relishing the peacefulness that came with being around her. "You need to get ready," I said. "The meeting starts in a few minutes." Marin kissed me, then started changing. I turned back to the window and waited. Although we were married now, I tried to remain a gentleman. She tugged at my elbow when she was done, and we left the room, walking together and holding hands. The school had always been quiet, but now it felt empty. We only passed 2 people on our way to Inesco's office, and our steps echoed loudly off the hallway walls. We were the last ones to arrive, and stood in the back. Inesco looked up from a pile of papers and glanced around the room. He must have realized we were all present, for he stood and clasped his hands behind his back. "First, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm not referring to this meeting. I mean being here at the school. We are still weak, and despite the rise of a new enemy, we were able to defeat him. I must admit that when I became the master of the school, I had my doubts about whether I could do the job. Master Peeves was larger than life, and I knew his shoes would not be easily filled." Inesco paused, and it seemed as if he were searching for the right words. "These are trying times, and the way ahead will be difficult. The Terran school is no more, and Valgard's traitors will pay for their crimes. The Assembly will deal with Hrodin and the others, which means that this is the only school that remains. Master Katori and I have spoken at length the last few days, and we are at an impasse. I've decided to put the decision to a vote among you." "What are we voting on?" Curate Henrik asked. "Whether or not to disband the Dragon Riders." A collective gasp echoed around the room. "Why would we do that?" Marin asked. "The reasons are many," Inesco replied. "Lack of resources, namely. Our contracts with the people who bring us dragons have been rescinded." Rescinded? What for? Anesco raised his hands, patting the air placatingly. Nothing on our end, fortunately. The source of their dragons has been disrupted, so they don't have any eggs to hatch. I've been told that it will be a few years before they can deliver anything to us. The cancellation of the contracts was for our sake as well as theirs. It frees us to buy from other sources. Are there other sources? It was a female adept who asked, the one whose name I could never remember. Possibly. We've never been faced with this issue before, so I don't have an answer to that. I have an idea, I said. Anesco looked at me and nodded. We could start searching out the groups who have dragons illegally, like the ones I found Scion with. I know I've mentioned it before, but it seems worth repeating given the circumstances. That's an option, Anesco replied. First we must decide whether or not to disband. The details that follow can be figured out later. Silence fell over the room. It was hard for me to believe that disbanding the riders was even an option for Anesco. Obviously, I wasn't the master over the entire school, and there were probably more moving parts than I could imagine, but still, the idea of ending the Dragon Riders seemed wrong. I say we continue to train new students, even if we don't have dragons, Maren said. I'm with her, Curate Henrik agreed. All those who agree to keep the riders together, Anesco asked. I raised my hand and was relieved to see every hand in the room go up as well. Then it is decided. The school will remain open, and the riders will continue in their duties. There is one other matter I'd like to vote on. I can make the decision myself, but I want this to be collectively agreed upon. With the Terran school gone, Master Kotori and Curate Demori are like a ship without wind. I want them to remain here permanently until such a time comes that the Terran school can be opened again. They fought beside us, Curate Henrik said. More than once too. That's enough to have my vote. Anesco smiled. All those who agree? Again, every hand went up. Very well. For now, all will continue normally. As we flesh out our plans and make our way ahead, some things around here may change. I don't expect you to like these changes, but they will always be made with the best intentions. Take the day off to rest. We will resume tomorrow. Everyone began filing out of the room, but Anesco motioned for Maren and me to stay. Once everyone had left, we sat in the chairs across from his desk. If you two are going to succeed here, you must follow my instructions. I told you not to leave the school, and you defied me. It's my fault, Maren said. It was my idea to go, and I knew Eldwin wouldn't be able to stay behind. And to be fair, I added, we managed to restore magic. Yes, but the problem was caused by you two to begin with, wasn't it? I nodded sheepishly. Inadvertently, but, yes. Forget your past transgressions. If you want to be curates, I need to know that I can trust you to do what I ask. I'm sorry, I said. It won't happen again. You said that last time. It won't, Maren promised. I know that I'm stubborn and rebellious, but I've learned a lot from my mistakes, and I don't want to make any more of them. Not if I can help it, anyway. Anesco stared at each of us in turn until we squirmed uncomfortably. Then he smiled. I believe you. From today forth, you two are promoted to the rank of curate, but you will not be teachers. My excitement faded. Why not? Because sitting in a classroom with new students is not the best use of your talents. It's clear that you two are inseparable, but also that you both like adventure. As such, you two will be in charge of special assignments outside the school. Goblin rumors, you two. Missing children, you two. Disruption to magic, Maren said with a laugh. You two, Anesco repeated. I glanced at Maren from the corner of my eye. Anesco had her pinned down correctly, but I didn't like adventures. I wanted a quiet, simple life. As long as Maren was around, however, I knew that wasn't going to happen, and that was all right with me. "Do you accept?" Enesco asked. Marin looked at me, and I nodded. "We accept," she said gleefully. If there was one thing I knew to be true, it was that the future would always be uncertain, but it would never be boring. This has been The Dark Rider, Dragon Riders of Osnen, Book 10, written by Richard Fierce, narrated by Andrew McDermott, copyright 2020 by Richard Fierce, production copyright by Richard Fierce.